to know that I was, people with my disability were considered just really, really means the world.
On the ground below, hunters load an unconscious Tombstone into a vehicle. Another aims at Peter. But MJ uses her stun gun on his neck, incapacitating him.
Jenna, Ross, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. We're going to be talking about audio description in games. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, Jenna, kick us off. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. My name's Jenna. I'm a producer of live and interactive audio description at Descriptive Video Works, which is under Keyword Studios. And what that means is I specialize in video games. It's my bread and butter. So audio description, for anyone who has never heard of it before, is a scripted narrator who speaks between existing dialogue to describe on-screen visuals. DVW has been doing it in TV and film for many, many years, but it is only just recently starting to appear in video games.
A hunter vehicle careens toward them. It narrowly misses them and collides with a swing tower ride.
Don't fall. Oh no.
There's a handful of AAA games who have professionally produced audio description, a few others who have tried it in-house, and it's still very new. So the first ever AAA game to have audio description was The Last of Us Part 2 that came out in, wait, was it 2022? I think it was. Ross, you can probably answer that better than I can, but...
Was it? I thought it was Last of Us Part 1. The first
It was
one
Part 1. You're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Part 2 just recently got audio description.
Yeah.
So all that to say, it's only in the past few years that video games have started getting audio description, and it's been so fun to try out new things with each new game that decides to try it.
And Ross, you're an expert, a specialist on this. You've been consulting on how to make this better. But tell us, how does it actually work in practice? And why does it make such a big difference?
My name is Ross Miner, and I'm an accessibility professional consultant specializing in video games. And I'm on the Descriptive Video Works advisory board for audio descriptions. And I'm also an audio description narrator myself. But yeah, so I mean, how does audio description help? What it does is put us on an equal playing field as everyone else. We, as blind people, are able to perceive and understand the same things that are being presented to a sighted audience. All the little unspoken gestures, whether they're like hand gestures or unspoken things that we don't get to see, we now get to experience. And in terms of cut scenes, in terms of fight scenes, there's a ton of that in video games. And so it really does enhance the entire experience, because a game can be, totally accessible for blind people. You can complete it from beginning to end, but you don't know the story. You don't know what's happening during the cutscenes. Well, audio description has now allowed us to do that. And as such, I've gotten to experience The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, and I'm currently playing Spider-Man, all with audio descriptions. And it's been incredible.
He then leaps toward a second coaster. He lands on the coaster.
Don't worry, I've got you.
Peter catches a crossbow bolt.
Circle button.
He dodges shots from hunters. Peter flips toward them.
L1.
He redirects a rocket onto the hunters, then lands on the coaster.
I was blinded at a young age, and so I used to play video games when I could see, and never did I think that I would actually be able to play a video game just with all the mechanics and experience the story in its entirety. And now I can, thanks to audio description.
And there must have been a moment then that you could come back to video games. You said you played them as a child, then you presumably weren't able to play them for a while these accessibility features weren't there. What did it mean to be able to go back to that childhood hobby?
Oh, man. I mean, it's, gamers love nostalgia, and just being able to play a game, a AAA game, mind you, it's like its own form of nostalgia, because being able to just hold the controller, sit down and relax and like play a video game. I mean, I lived for that as a kid, and I live for that now. And it's funny because when I could see, I played the Spider-Man 2 game on the PS2, and it almost feels like full circle now that I'm playing Spider-Man 2, obviously a different one, but on the PS5. And it's just such a good feeling, because I'm able yeah, play the game, experience the story, but I'm also able to converse online with others about the story because I know everything that's happening. And I mean, a huge reason I play video games is for escapism, but also for socializing, interacting with other people that have those similar interests.
And it's one thing to have gaming as a hobby, it's another to then decide to make it your job. How did you get into consulting on this?
Yeah, a very good question. So I first began creating content on YouTube just as a hobby. And I very much saw it as that when I first began creating. But then I noticed how many people, whether blind or sighted, really cared about accessibility. And so I think I was in the Paralympics at the time, COVID just hit, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do game accessibility full time. And so I retired, and I think it was Descriptive Video Works who reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be on the advisory board. And so, of course, I said yes. And this was before they had even provided the descriptions for The Last of Us. And so once they did that, I knew I was in the right place because DVW has honestly kind of been leading the way when it comes to audio description in video games.
And Jenna, how does it actually work in practice? So you have a studio come to you and say, we want to make sure that our game is accessible. What happens next?
So, I mean, our piece of the puzzle is just one of several accessibility features that will make a game both playable and enjoyable by people with low or no vision or even with cognitive disabilities. So we're not the ones who go through and say, hey, this is how you make your game fully playable by blind people. We are just one of several features that will do that. But we usually end up comparing our workflow to TV and film because audio description has been much more established in TV and film for several years now. And it's a lot different because usually when we write for TV and film, we are part of a post-production step where all of the audio and visuals have been very locked down and finalized, and it's easy to know what the intended final visuals are going to be because you can see them. They're already in that state. By contrast, for video games, they have a much longer development cycle, and the narration that we create for the game is as much a part of that game as any other dialogue or music or sound effects. So that means that when we're seeing what we're supposed to be describing, it's not quite done yet. It's never quite done. So it's a bit more of a challenge. It's really fun because we get to reference all sorts of different source material to know what the final visuals are going to look like. But it also means we don't see everything all come together until the game itself comes out. We don't see like what our narrator sounds like in the scene with everything fully mixed together. We don't see like what all of the final lighting and textures and colors look like until everything finally comes together. But the fun part of that is it does mean that we kind of get to experience that first look at the final version of it alongside everyone else. We get to see it all come together and add to each other and just create this harmonious experience for everyone to like go through at the same time as everybody else. And it's really great when what we've helped make is additive to the game itself. Anytime a new game release comes out that we've helped work on, I spend hours and hours just watching Twitch streams of people playing through it with our audio description on. And what I notice is that people aren't commenting on like the narrator's performance or how we scripted things or like specific things about the audio description itself. They're just reacting to the story and sort of experiencing it the same as any other player who didn't use audio description. And that parity is the goal. We want all players to have as close an experience emotionally and in terms of gameplay as possible. We want everyone to be able to participate in this media and this art form with as close an experience as possible. But all that to say, the workflow is going to be different for every single game, for every engine, for every client, because no two things are the same. There is no average game. There is no average game length or game format or game tone or accent. There is there are things that are going to be different every single time, but that's the fun part of it, because we get to make up new rules for ourselves and we get to decide some new cool stuff that we get to do. And those are what makes it, that's what makes it really, really fun to put audio description into new games.
And presumably that whole process, it's not cheap. Do you find that it's quite an easy sell? You have studios coming to you asking for this, or do you have to go out and really actually convince studios that this is the right thing to be adding in?
I mean, I would say it's cheaper than you think. Obviously, I'm not going to give you a quote for your game right now over this call, but in comparison to, wait, sorry, how do I put this? I'll just say it's not as expensive as you would think, but given that we are just one feature among several that would make a game more accessible, usually by the time a studio comes to us, they have made that decision to strive for full inclusivity and as much accessibility as possible. It doesn't usually take much convincing because of consultants like Ross, they have already heard, usually from several different sources, that like, hey, I want to play this game. We have tested it for you. And as part of their consulting, usually one of the things that they will mention will be audio description, because in addition to, like Ross said, in addition to knowing what buttons to push and when to make it from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, you want to know what's going on, presumably at some point in between the start and end of the game. You want to be able to follow and participate in the story. You want to know who you are, what you're doing, and why, and you want to be able to follow that narrative. So I do some outreach to different game studios, but for the most part, it is pretty internally motivated when they come to us, which is really great to see that shift in the industry towards more accessibility as time goes on.
And Ross, we talked about The Last of Us. That game got a lot of attention, a lot of credit for its focus on accessibility. Why do you think it was that game that sort of kicked things off a bit?
Well, I think it's simply because we've never seen a AAA game fully embrace accessibility on that level. I mean, there are many games, high budget games, who had accessibility features, but this was, you could tell across the board that they were trying to accommodate for all disabilities. And I believe it launched with somewhere around like 60, 65 accessibility features, which is just, again, it was never heard of. And as a result, of course, it made a huge, huge splash in the disabled gaming community, but just in the gaming community as a whole, because just to give some statistics, 15 to 20% of the world has some sort of disability, but 25% of gamers identify as having some sort of disability or being disabled. And so not only did these accessibility features help me as someone who's blind or someone who's hard of hearing, but they can help others who may not have known that they need these accessibility features. And so I think, with a bunch of disabled people going, oh, wow, this is incredible, I think that just made a huge splash and caused a lot of other gamers to like really reevaluate what they found important in video games. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a snowball effect from there,
And I know that a lot of the work here, we've been talking about The Last of Us Part 2, Spider-Man 2. What a lot of these games have in common is that they're relatively linear, story-based games. Do you think there's a challenge around multiplayer games with lots of endings, like a Baldur's Gate 3, for example?
Accessibility in gaming is about giving players the tools they need to play the game on an equal playing field. And so, yes, I do agree that these games are sort of linear, but I do think that there is a lot of potential for multiplayer games. If you take Forza Motorsport, I have seen blind people compete toe-to-toe with sighted people online. And when you play online, you don't have any driving assist whatsoever. When you design accessibility features for online gameplay, yes, you'll have to think outside the box. You'll have to do things a little bit differently than you would if it were just a single player game. But with Forza Motorsport and even Mortal Kombat, it's proof right there that give players the tools they need. They can play online with able-bodied players and not have a perceived advantage or disadvantage.
Jenna, it's quite a tough time in the games industry. Obviously, there's a lot of layoffs, a lot of consolidation. I'm wondering, first of all, do you think that studios are going to continue to invest to make sure that they're making accessibility better than it is now? And then related to that, is there potentially a challenge that AI might be seen as an answer for this and taking it kind of out of human hands and putting it into that of an artificial intelligence?
I really wish I had a crystal ball that I could consult right now to know exactly how the games industry is going to be going in a few years, because yeah, it is very tumultuous right now. And of course, I hate seeing any announcement of layoffs. Usually it's not great to see people that you've worked with personally be affected by it. In addition to hearing about all of these people whose jobs were impacted by it. We are a third-party service provider, so it's difficult to say exactly how our work will be impacted, if at all. But in spite of all the layoffs, we have seen still a growing trend toward greater accessibility, especially in studios who have already chosen to implement it in previous games. They've sort of set an expectation for themselves and for their peers to only go upward from there. On the business side of things, it just makes sense to care about such a large percentage of people. It is the world's largest minority, so it makes good business sense to make accessibility features that are going to allow more people to consume your game. There's a difference between accessibility and approachability. Accessibility is just removing barriers it's intended to remove barriers for people with disabilities to be able to consume your media. It's removing things like putting in audio description, putting in navigation assistance, putting in a screen reader to remove barriers so that all players can have an equivalent experience. Approachability is making it appealing to more people. So that's not what we're talking about here. We don't want every game to be, bland and watered down and not have any controversial narratives or anything like that. No, we just want it to be physically possible for everyone to play it, if at all possible. And that just makes good business sense. We want more people to be able to play more games, even if you wouldn't necessarily choose to, even if it's not your cup of tea. You want it to be an option that's available to you, not something that is just closed off because you can't physically play the game. And of course, we have to address the AI is the buzz of the industry right now, trying to replace humans or increase efficiency. Right now, we're not really seeing that yet in our particular line of work. We might reassess that in a few years, but we're not seeking out any AI tools, especially not to replace human writers, narrators, or mixers. We're not using it to replace any creative workflows right now. To some extent, it's unavoidable. I think in one of my software tools, like the spell check is technically AI powered, which, we're not going to go out of our way to avoid that. But I'm always going to take my cues from the ACB and the NFB, who currently have issued statements strongly condemning the use of synthetic voices in audio description and in writing. I'm going to take my cues from them and from what our viewers and customers want, more so than what is the cheapest or easiest or the fastest option that's available to us, because creating the highest quality possible audio description is more important than anything else.
Ross, we've talked about quite a lot of very positive examples so far. I'm wondering if you have any where things have really fallen short, or kind of anything that you want to happen in the industry to make things better. Where's there still work to be done?
Yeah, well, in terms of audio descriptions, so it's like starting with The Last of Us Part 1, only strictly cinematic cutscenes were described, and some people found that to be a bummer. But it's constantly gotten better with each kind of iteration of video games that have had audio descriptions provided. Case in point with Spider-Man 2, audio descriptions now play during kind of in-game cutscenes that kind of flow into QuickTime events, and it's actually quite seamless. And so, of course, I think just the only con I see right now is that not enough games have audio description. I think that there's no reason not to have them, because many people think that they're only just for blind people, but in fact, many people use them, whether they have a cognitive disability or even if you just need to temporarily look away from the screen, if something else is distracting you. Like, that's where audio descriptions come into play. And so, as far as just anything that really needs to be improved, I would say just the frequency of audio descriptions. I think there's still always more room to just pack as many audio descriptions in a game as possible. So the frequency, and then just the number of games that have descriptions, because there are still many games where I would love to actually experience the story how it was meant to be experienced.
And a last one from me. Have there been any moments in the narration where you know it's really shocked you, or it's been particularly funny, or I don't know, just a moment where people who don't have it switched on will have missed something that could have been amazing?
Oh, I mean, just like, I know I keep saying like Spider-Man, for example, but like I'm reaching the end of the game, and so I don't want to give too many spoilers, but just really the cutscenes between like the bosses and the fight scenes. First off, all of that, if you don't have the descriptions on, it's literally just like grunts and punching sounds, and that's it. Or even unspoken dialogue, facial expressions, hand gestures, all of that stuff is missed. And so whether it is Spider-Man or The Last of Us, or Mortal Kombat, there have just been so many things in video games that I didn't realize I was missing until they were described to me. And that was the case with movies. When I began watching movies with audio descriptions, I was like, oh, I know everything that's happening. And then I actually listen, I'm like, oh, wow, there's so much. And so like Mortal Kombat, actually being able to watch all the fatalities and their gruesome, gory detail, I think it is just, I don't want to say like people take it for granted, but I just feel like I'm experiencing the game like everyone else, and it's just a really good feeling, because like, at the end of the day, this is what inclusivity feels like. And to know that I was, people with my disability were considered, just really means the world.
Jenna, same question to you. Is there any one moment where you thought this was really cool?
Oh, I love this question. This is great. I have had to do some very strange research at times to ensure the audio description is accurate. My Google search history could probably get me on a list somewhere for the weird terms that I've had to look up. Everything from martial arts moves to wrestling moves to what kind of animal is this, and all sorts of things. So there are definitely, I don't know if I would call them Easter eggs, but like additional information sprinkled throughout the audio description that sometimes draws attention to things that you might not have noticed before, but might also give some more depth to some of these characters and events that you already love. But I think there was this one particular moment with interspersed QTEs and cinematics near the beginning of Spider-Man 2 that was sort of the really cool moment for me. QuickTime events are where the game gives you a button prompt, and those button prompts are read via the game's screen reader, and those blend seamlessly with the cinematic events, which are audio described, that are kind of interspersed in between those. So it'll give you button prompt, thing happens, button prompt, thing happens, and it tells you exactly what you did, exactly how you were successful or not successful. It tells you what the characters are doing. And it was really cool to see all of that come together because I had seen each of those little individual dozens of pieces up until that point. I've seen, a 5-second video clip and then a 3-second video clip and then a 12-second video clip. I had never seen it fully come together until I played through it myself. And that moment where everything sort of seamlessly blends into this holistic experience that really makes you feel like Spider-Man was just, It was just cool. It was so cool. And I loved that. So that was the moment for me.
And it's those cool moments that I imagine just makes it all really worthwhile. Thank you so much.
Oh, definitely.
Jenna Ross, thank you for chatting to us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so
us.
much.